Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Anika Apple Podcast. This is our January Divine Guidance episode. I am glad to have you here with me today. Looking forward to a very robust outlook for the year 2026 and highlights of what is important for you to know in this month of January as we transition into February of 2026. Again, my name is Anika Apple. I'm a trusted advisor and spiritual strategist. That is likely how you know me. And today, I want to start off by standing deeply in my divine identity, which is one of the themes that we'll talk about in the podcast today. So I'm here before you as God's prophet and also as who God calls their heart on earth. I am the apple of God's eye and humbled to be able to be here to do the work that God has ordained me to do. I am moving in a way that is shifting to lead through my divine alignment and pray that as God continues to lead me in the way that they desire for me to go, that it will encourage and inspire you to be who God has called you to be as well. A little bit of backstory for those of you that might be new to these divine guidance episodes. Um, a, a couple of years ago, God began to speak to me about the importance of sharing what was flowing through them to me. And I would get these divine messages and share them in some of the circles that I'm a part of, and then begin to get confirmation from person after person that God was speaking to them about my needing to have an outlet to share what God has been moving through me. And I decided to add the divine guidance episodes to my podcast, and we'll be transitioning that in the next couple of months, and we'll make sure that you know exactly where to find these episodes, where to find the archives, all of those things, so that you can continue to hear what God is saying for us, so that we are aware and prepared, and we understand from the mouth of God what is most important. Also, for those of you who are new to the Divine Guidance episodes, there are a couple things that I typically start with. One is the importance of you ensuring that you take every word you ever hear prophetically, that you take it back to God. You always want to sit with God to ask God, is this word for me? And what should I be doing in alignment with what it is that you are showing me? So you are taking it to God for confirmation of the word and then an understanding of its application in your life. It's really important for you to have the relationship with God where you're in constant conversation. So any prophetic word that is ever delivered should never stand just alone. It should always be confirmed through God, and then you should be asking, now what do I do with it, right? Because it's not enough to just have the knowledge, the information. It's about having the wisdom with what to do with it. And you will definitely want to take pieces back today that you hear through this divine guidance episode. So there are a couple of themes that that God gave me in advance to share with you, and I'm going to start with the whistleblowers. So one of the things that God has been talking to me about for several years now is that there is a time that we are leading into where there are going to be whistleblowers popping up from all over the place. And these whistleblowers are people whose assignment it has been to come into different spaces, to understand what's actually happening there, and then to be ingrained enough to be able to share the truth unequivocally so that people see the truth of what's been happening. So what might this look like? A whistleblower inside a company or an organization that has seen some of the interworkings that need to be exposed. Why this is really important right now is because this exposure that we know will be happening for us is going to create an opportunity for you to make decisions about whether or not the way things are happening in the world are what you expect, whether or not they are what you desire to continue to experience. Now, this is important because if we go back to the year of 2020, we know that we had an opportunity to make some really clear decisions as a global community about what we will stand for or not. right? So in 2020 in the United States, which is where I am, it was a pinnacle time for us to look at the societal unrest, the social unjust, and the murders simply that were happening over and over again, and make decisions about how we would move in accordance to those things. And what happened was awareness was created, and not just within the country, but around the world, like other things that we've been experiencing globally. And there was an opportunity for us to move and shift in a way that brought us back into alignment with what God would have created for us. And for many of us, it became, something that fired us up and that drew a lot of attention and some action. And then for many, it became complacency again as the norm. And the problem with that is that we live in an environment like what we are seeing today. And regardless of what your political beliefs may be, we're here to talk about the divine guidance. And the truth unequivocally is that God created their children. And whether or not you like the way that they look, or the way that they live their lives, or the relationships that they have, or what they choose to do for work, or all of those things, that's a conversation between an individual with God, because God is the only judge there is. But what's happening right now in the world is that in so many pockets and places, people are taking it upon themselves to use the name of God to do things that are absolutely ungodly. And it's very easy to say that God is not pleased, period, full stop. And so these people who have been tapped on the shoulders, who have assignments to be whistleblowers, are going to be stepping forward. And part of the role that we have is to ensure their safety. And what I mean by that is there's an opportunity for us to be covering and praying for those who have the difficult assignment of exposing some of the things that need to be exposed. And again, they need to be exposed because there has to be some dismantling of the systems and the processes and things that are rooted in inequity, rooted in inequality, rooted in discrimination and racism and sexism, and all of those things that are rooted in greed. All of these things that have been the way we've created a foundation across the globe, not only in the United States, but across the globe, are going to be shaken, and much of it is going to fall. And then we will be in a process where we have to build again. I'm careful not to use the word rebuild, because what we don't want is to reconstitute what already is there that is being deconstructed. Instead, we are going to be looking at a time where we've got to build from a foundation that's actually solid, rooted in what we know truth to be. And in order for us to do that, we have to see the exposure in front of our faces to know all of the things that have been happening. Because so many things have happened in ways that have created situations for people to be complicit. And it's been so difficult for you and I outside of those spaces to really understand what's happening, because there's so much smoke and mirrors. And as God begins to remove the smoke and mirrors, God begins to call people forward to their assignment. We have to remember our assignment, which is how we rally around those who are brave enough to complete the work that they established with God that they would do in this lifetime, to tell the truth. There's so many different things that are going to be exposed, and some systemic things that are absolutely just going to blow our minds. And what God said to me is that there's going to be a fall of these glass towers, right? These things that people think, like, no matter what, I'm going to be stable. I'm going to be still. I've built this thing, and, they built it as a monument to themselves, to their power, to their ego, and they're going to be destroyed. We're going to see them falling. And the problem with this that you might imagine is, if you were looking at a glass tower, you would be like, but Anika, shouldn't I be able to see what's happening in there? But when there's smoke and mirrors, what looks like glass on the outside is protecting what they don't want you to see on the inside, which is why the whistleblowers are being called to step forward. So this is not the first time that God has given me a message about the whistleblowers, but this is the timing where they're going to begin to rally, where there's going to begin to be so much stirring. And so if you are someone who believes in the power of prayer, I would ask of you that you take it to God, whether or not you should be on prayer assignment to cover the whistleblowers so that they can come forward and share the things that they are meant to. We are going to see across the next 2 years a massive amount of people coming forward on things. And many of their stories are going to come with the caveat, the line, the clarity that it was God that called them, that told them they could no longer hold on to what they had been collecting, what they had been observing, what they had been writing, that it was time for them to come out and share these things because it has always been their assignment. Remember that. We don't always understand the assignments of others because God doesn't give all of that direction and information to each person, right? I know what my assignment is. You should know what your assignment is. Not all of us will understand all of the pieces until the time that God determines is right for us to know and understand. So before you make assumptions about whether or not you believe what someone is saying is true, particularly for the whistleblowers, you've got to take it back to God. There has to be a rhythm, period, of taking things back to God. I have said it before, and it came up again as God was giving me the themes for this month's divine guidance. But the relationship that we have with God, really bringing our ear to God's mouth, is so critical in order for us to understand instructions when it happens. There are going to be some moments where God gives you an instruction to move. And as I've said in the past, everybody might be running in one direction and God might be telling you to go in the opposite direction. It may feel counterintuitive, but it may be the very thing that absolutely protects you from whatever else is happening, right? We cannot assume that the way the masses move is in alignment with the assignment that God has for us. I think about the firefighters and just how treacherous it is to run into a burning building, right? Like honoring them. And that there are these moments where they might hear something and go dig a little bit deeper, go deeper into the fire because perhaps it's an animal or it's a child or a person that's trapped under something. Had they not been willing to listen out, to hear, trained to pay attention for those signs and gather information as quickly as they can, always scanning to make sure that they preserve life, then those people would not be able to see another day. In the same way, you have the ability to hearken your ear to what God is saying. And it could be a matter of life and death. It could be a matter of you stepping into the divine assignment that God has for you. It may be a matter of whether or not you have the opportunity to experience the fullness of abundance that God has set aside for you. But you won't know if you don't develop that relationship. So that is so important. So back to the whistleblowers, the things that I want you to remember is that it's their assignment. The reason that it's happening now is because there has to be more exposure. We have proven as humanity that we clearly need a lot more proof. Why? I don't know. But we clearly need a lot more proof that things are not going the way they should be. We clearly need a lot more proof that there are people whose lives are being taken, livelihood is being destroyed simply because choices and decisions that are not aligned with who God created us to be. Simply because of power and ego, simply because of trying to divert from the truth, simply because there is hatred, simply because. And that's not what God created. That's not who we are. And so we will recognize them coming forward, know that they have been placed in those positions so that they have the information and wisdom to share, and will witness the fall of the glass towers as those people come forward. And the ask is to cover them, is to support them, to embrace them. Because if you've never been in a situation of having to be a whistleblower, it's probably really difficult for you to understand what it might feel like to be working in an environment or serving in an environment where you see and know things and you want to be in alignment with the people around you, but you know you cannot. And at the same time, your assignment is to capture the information so that the truth can come forward. It's a really big deal, and it's not an easy task, and they will need community. The next thing that I want to transition into in general for the year of 2026 is the importance of prayer. And I'll also say healing is important as well. But I want to start with prayer. What I witness right now is that there are so many people who feel helpless for all of the things that are happening in the world. It feels very frustrating. It feels like it is so much bigger than, you. And yet we know when we come together as community, when we have an aligned purpose, that there's nothing we cannot do. We've seen it time and time in history where people have rallied around the thing that was most important to them. And we've seen them shift the trajectory of what was happening in the world. This time is no different. However, the divisiveness and the division between people, the intentional divisiveness and division between people is so significant. If you've been watching what's happened, it's not just the high level division between people that used to be there, whether that's gender or religion or, race, ethnicity. It's not even those traditional things anymore. It's coming down to these very specific levels, which create more and more groups of division. That's intentional. And then we constantly have information coming to us, through the media, social media, etc. And not all of it is valid. And we're so busy taking in all that stuff all the time. And we're not taking all that stuff back to God to say, help me process and understand all of this, that it's just sitting with us. And so we begin to have even more and more distrust of one another. We begin to feel ourselves distanced from one another. And the way for us to bring ourselves back is to find common ground. And that common ground can come to us through prayer. It is through the pure prayer of our hearts, the language of connection that we have with God, where we can begin to let go of the differences that exist. When we tap into the all of God, we see ourselves as humanity, as a collective, as a whole. As God looks at us, there is no leveling to who and what race and all of that stuff. That is shenanigans. That's stuff that man put on each other. In the purity of commune with God that we call prayer, there is an opportunity for us to see one another as equal and to surrender ourselves once again to show up in the way that God desires for us in this world. And when we do that, we will begin to shift the trajectory of the events and things that are happening in this world. You've got to pray. What should you pray about? Everything. And pray with a pure heart. Sometimes prayer can be just simply silence, where your heart is just speaking directly to God, right? And some of us would say through Holy Spirit. Sometimes what that looks like is calling out the things that are fears, that the things that are painful, the things that are uncomfortable for you to witness, and asking God what to do. Sometimes prayer is just simply gratitude to God. Sometimes it is just simply saying, God, I need to hear from you, and I'm not moving from this place until I do. But we have to pray. Our hopelessness just adds to the chaotic energy that exists in the world. We cannot allow ourselves to fall to that place when we know what we know about who covers us. I was in a conversation with someone the other day, and God was speaking through me for that person. And I said to them, what I'm hearing God say is, remember who your backing is. Remember who has you, who created you and asked you to be here in this very moment for this time. If you think for a moment that it is not intentional that you are here right now, then you have missed the whole thing. You're here right now in this moment with an assignment, with a purpose for why you exist in this particular time in the history of the world. And so if that doesn't give you some encouragement to figure out what the assignment is, to sit with God, to ask what to do next, and I'm not sure what else I could say. You're here for a purpose and in this time. And prayer is the way that we can begin to deepen the relationship with God. One, so that we can have peace with what is happening, remembering that God's in control. Two, knowing that we have not let the things that we are seeing that are wrong, that are unjust, go on without having conversation, without rallying before God to say that we need a shift. Another, because it's important for us to speak the truth of what we desire to experience here. I always say to God, I want it to be established on earth in the way that it is in heaven. And speaking to that, I can call forward that what the experience is in heaven is not the chaos that we experience here on earth. It is an opportunity for us to be clear about what we expect to happen, the changes that we desire to see, and how we want people to come together. And it will provide you with an outlet to know that there is something meaningful that you are doing to contribute to the shift. This is a time for us to return to prayer. It is a time to pray in groups. It is a time to bring your family together. It is a time to come together as community and pray. It is a time to use your voice, your anointed voice, to speak to the Creator about what you need to see happening in the world. It is all of that. And part of the work for us to do, to not miss, is the importance of our healing journey. Because as we do the healing work, we see less differentiation between one another. And what I mean by that is that in your own journey to self-acceptance, which you experience as you're healing, you have so much acceptance and grace for other people. And that is critical in a time like now. It is also really important to heal so that you can stand in your divine truth, in the strength that God placed on the inside of you, that you show up in a way that creates the kind of change you know the world needs to experience because you have the ability to change it. So ensure that you're spending time with God to understand what are the things that you need to work on. What are the things that God would set before you as a part of your healing journey? Because if you ask God to show you, God will. Many of you know my story, and it's in my book, Healing is Required. I say all the time to God, show me me. And when I ask God to show me, God does. And it's not always what I want to see. But let me tell you something. As we get ready to move into identity next, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you. And right now, there's a lot of telling people the value of their humanity, and it's disgusting. It's deplorable. It is not in alignment with God. I don't care what they use to support the actions that they are taking. It is not in alignment with God. And when you sit with God on your own, you will know that for yourself. So your healing work is important too. And through healing, what I believe, what is certain, is that you will begin to see the ways that you were designed to stand boldly in this time. We all have assignments. I'm going to skip identity and come back to it at the end. I want to go into distraction because I feel like the segue is perfect. So as I was sitting with God, specifically around the distraction that is happening in the world, this thing is intentional. As a matter of fact, I did a video on TikTok the other day, and it was like, is it by design or is it divine? And that's a question we ought to be asking ourselves. Is it by design or is it divine? Divine is like, this is the word, it's the information, it's the thing that God needs us to have. By design is, this is what the algorithm, this is what man is trying to do. This is the smoke and mirrors. This is diverting us from seeing the truth outside of ourselves and within. It's trying to keep us so heavily distracted that we don't step into the fullness of who we are, that we don't operate from a place that is grounded in our purpose, grounded in our divinity, grounded in who God has called us to be. And the problem with this is it's not a new thing, right? Distraction is around us all the time. And I said to God, I was like, is there something specific that you want me to share with them? God led me to this scripture. So I'm going to read from the NIV for those of you who don't read the Bible. I'm going to share it with you, and I know this will be something that you can identify and connect with, and you're certainly welcome to read it for yourself. I'm going to be coming out of Mark chapter 14, reading verses 29 and 37. But we'll be referencing this time that you perhaps have heard about, where Jesus tells Peter that he's going to deny him. He tells Peter that he will deny him. And Peter says in verse 29, Peter declared, even if all fall away, I will not. This belief, like, I love you so much, Jesus, that there's no way, no matter what happens, I will not fall away from you. And haven't we been like that in times, right? Where we're so clear. If something happens, oh, I know what side of the aisle I stand on. I know what side of the fence I'm on. I know which team I'm on. We're clear, right? But then the stuff happens. How do you protect yourself for falling into the distractions? Falling away from what is true, falling away from your values, falling away from what you know is your purpose. Right? And if we go down, Jesus stops and he's praying, and then in verse 37, it says, he returns to his disciples and he found them sleeping. And he wakes Peter up and says, Peter, are you asleep? Could you not keep watch for 1 hour? Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. The spirit is willing, but the body is weak. That's the thing for us to understand. That sometimes we have an alignment. It's like the desire to do the thing we know we're called to do. But in our humanness and the way we operate every day, that's where the weakness comes up, right? And so we fast forward over into what happens ultimately, which is in verse 60 something. It's like verses 66 through 72 are where, Peter denies Jesus twice. And exactly what Jesus told him was going to happen is what happened. Before the rooster crowed twice, Peter denied him twice. Are you the one that was with them? I don't know what you're talking about, right? And what could have made Peter say that, Is it ever possible? Do we ever find ourselves in moments where we're looking at what everybody else is doing in the world and think we need to be doing what they're doing? Are there moments of confusion? Perhaps we thought we understood things so clearly. We thought we knew truth. When he was standing with Jesus, he felt like he was standing with the truth, right? And maybe apart from him, because now he got pulled away and they're arresting him and all of this stuff. Maybe now he's questioning, right? We have to look at this in the lens of who we are today. And to know yourself is to know what are those places of weakness. Jesus gave him a very simple instruction, which is in alignment with the theme that I just gave you, which is pray. Watch and pray so that you will not fall into temptation. This is what the distractions are intended to do. Can we play on so much emotion? Can we keep you in the chaos of seeing so many different things and conflicting stories? Can we now create all of this content that's not even real people, right? So you can't tell the difference between what's really real and what's a deep fake. Like, there's all of this trying to distract you from knowing truth. And there is one source that unequivocally will give you the truth again and again, and you're not going there. You've got to pray. Thank you. Blessings. You've got to pray. You've got to stay in relationship with God. Because when you do, you will be able to cut through the noise and the distractions. Is it divine or is it by design? Because so often we're allowing our eyes to be averted to what's really happening. You can think of some of the bigger things that have happened, scandals that have been on the news over the past couple of years, right? Everybody's looking at that thing. And over here, there's a whole bunch of other things happening. There were literally decisions being made in the Supreme Court while everybody was looking at Sean Combs' trial. Like, what are we doing? We cannot allow ourselves to just float in the direction of wherever it looks like smoke is coming from. We have to utilize our discernment in a level that we understand that distractions will come. And so we have to posture ourselves to make sure we don't fall to those distractions. We've got to be able to know and expect that there's going to be something that's going to try and create confusion and stay clear. And how we do that is by making sure we have time by ourselves. We have time in prayer with God. We have time in meditation. We're not allowing everything that's available to us to be consumed. Even entertainment created for entertainment's sake can deposit things in your psyche that you remember. And they create connections, associations with things that help you to believe the things that then get thrown out in front of you through media. If you are not in control of the narrative, somebody else is. And when they are in control of the narrative, you are at the mercy of what they decide to tell you, which is why every single divine guidance episode, I make it a point of reminding you that you always have to take things back to God. I'm clear. I know my heart for God. I know my assignment. I know why I'm here, and I know what I'm delivering. But you need to know that for yourself. Before you take the words that I deliver to you, you need to take it to God and be clear and have the relationship with God. I'm moving in a time in my life where when I listen or hear something, immediately I know I can't listen to this until I have time to sit with God. And in other moments, it's like, this is not for me. It's so clear. And in other moments, I'm like, God, am I supposed to? And I just wait for the answer. To build that kind of discipline in what you allow to come into your psyche, what you allow to be in your environment, who you allow to be on your team, in your life, in your home, like those kinds of things that you might not think are big deals are massive. Because we are easily influenced. Peter was so close to Jesus. Like there is no way, even if everybody else falls away, I'm not going to turn my back on you. I will never deny you. And yet he did. And in moments, hours, even with the best of intentions, right? What I read to you in verse 38, the spirit is willing, but the body is weak. Let us understand where we are weak and ask God to support us in strengthening those things. And it may be about changing practices. It may be about new disciplines. It may be whatever it is for you, but you should know. This year, expect a ton of distraction. And I mean this when I say to you, when there are big things happening, see the big thing and use your periphery to understand what else is going on. Ask the question to God, what is this covering? What should I really be focused on? Where should I really have my energy spent? What should I really be talking about and addressing to the communities with which I serve or support? That's the kind of posture we need to have so that we are not constantly caught up in the smoke and mirrors, that we are not constantly allowing our attention to be shifted from one place to the next. And so now I want to come into identity and I'm going to close this episode here. I said earlier, if you don't know who you are, the world will tell you. And right now, over the past couple of years, I've witnessed so many people telling people what their value is by the way they're treated, by the way that cavalierly life is taken, by the way that people destroy families and relationships just because. And we know this is not new. It's all throughout the Bible. We know that it happens. I was reading something a couple days ago about, it was in a flyer, transatlantic slave trade, the cost for a cargo of my people who look like me and share my skin color. And I am just blown away that through all the lessons and experiences that we have had and all of the things that we have survived as people, that we would find ourselves back in the eve of what is now. And for some of you, you're probably thinking I'm referring to, what's happening in the US with ICE or different different wars and political disagreements happening across regions of the world. But I am really talking about the human condition. How difficult it is for people marginalized in any way to rebuild who they are, to see themselves, to remember the value that they have, and then to go through the crushing again and again. I have found that God has been speaking to me about value as a part of identity, about worthiness as a part of identity. And so much of that you can find in the word, but even more importantly than that, by sitting with God and asking God to clarify your identity, to tell you who you are to them. That's the thing that no one can take away from you. And understanding your identity comes with some pretty significant power. Because when you know who you are to God, you understand the assignment that God has given you, you know what kind of protection you have from God. Jesus knew his identity, and he knew he would have to walk this path. And there were so many times that just simply people were at him, ready to arrest him, to find him. But he knew he had to deliver, he had to get to this point to complete the assignment, and he trusted God to protect him. Now, that's not him sitting idle like, God, okay, I hope you will protect me, and I'm just going to sit here in the middle of the square. Sometimes he had to slip through the crowds, right? Sometimes he had to make a decision about going a different way. Sometimes he had to do those things. And even when we haven't had a conversation, we don't see him having a conversation with God. We know that he was constantly in prayer. So whether he knew because God had already told him, it was already deposited in him, he remembered, he understood, or whether he had the conversation in the moment with God, he was operating in a way that was in alignment. And that's what happens when you understand your identity. You have got to know who you are. And when you know who you are from God, it does not matter what other people say about you or to you. It will not faze you in the way that if you are looking for man to tell you you're enough. Because when you look for people to tell you your identity, when you look for them to confirm it from you, anytime they decide you are not operating in alignment with them, they can take that away. And then you're left confused about who you are. This is why healing is so important, because your identity is the truth of who you are. Your healing is your birthright, and it helps you accept and understand and stand in the truth. It's not easy to get to a place of acceptance all the time of who God has called you to be, what assignment it is that God has given you. Sometimes they feel really big. There's some parts of my assignment that I understood right away, and I was like, cool, it's aligned. Yeah, like I think I probably, remember that from when I was a kid. And there are other pieces that I was like, how do I say that out loud? What do people think as I say that out loud? And the other day I was having conversation around some work that I'm doing in my business, and God said, "But who do I call you? What name have I given you? Who do I say you are?" Because that's what I'm asking you to stand in. I am God's heart on earth. That is who God says I am. That is who God has created me to be. And it doesn't matter if other people believe that or not. You've got to be able to ground yourself in your identity in that way. Who does God say that you are? What are you here to do? And let God do all of the credentialing. We worry about being able to prove that we're this and that and all of that stuff, when actually, if you're operating in a place that is in alignment with God, God is going to do all that for you anyway. I have a page before me with, I don't even know, maybe 6 lines of notes. It's God doing what God needs you to know, what God needs you to hear. And we have an opportunity to live our life like that when we know who we are. So the question for you to ask yourself is, who are you? Who does God say you are? I remember a few years ago when God said to me, this was about 4 years ago, I was journaling one day and God said, "You are my prophet. From now on, introduce yourself as my prophet." And I was like, I can do that. I know I'm a prophet. We know. Yeah, I can do that. Okay. And God said, "No," I said, "as God's prophet. Introduce yourself as my prophet." And I was like, "Oh no." People are going to make the assumption that I think that like I'm like, the best prophet or whatever that looks like the shenanigans. And I don't need that. I'm not interested in that. And God said, "That's not what I said. Introduce yourself as my prophet." And what I came to understand really quickly is that there are many people God has called to be God's prophet. And for whatever reason that matters to God, that is what we are expected to honor, not how it makes us feel, not creating a space of comparison, because it isn't that. We just simply are doing what it is that God has called us to do, standing in our divine assignment, our divine identity. And you have an identity too. You've got to know what that is so that no one can tell you who you are not, and that you stand in the fullness of everything that comes along with that identity. It's like you think about a license or your passport, right? It's like it gives you certain privileges, and so does your identity in God. You've got to know who you are, or the world will tell you, and they will undervalue you every single time because they don't know your assignment. So make it a point to sit with God across the next week, 14 days, and ask God every day, "God, who do you say that I am? What is my assignment? What is my purpose? How do I get to the root of that if I am struggling to understand it? Can you help me?" You will need to know your identity. Your identity is going to inform for you how you live in to your purpose, and your purpose is required because we are in the battle of all battles. For all of us, every generation living today, this is the battle. And I say that with full reverence for everything that the baby boomers have lived through. Full reverence, because your walk has not been easy. It has not been easy. You've seen a lot. And to watch some of the things that are happening today, I know it tears you apart. And this battle is so big, and it is so spiritual. And it is not something that we will simply be able to fight on the ground. We have to fight it strategically, knowing who we are and in alignment with God and loving on one another. So I would say to you that the work to understand your identity is critical in the year 2026. And it may take you time to embrace that, and that's okay. It may take you time to feel like you're clear, and that's okay too. But that identity relationship, that is you and God. And there are intermediaries, there are people who do work to help you understand that. It's part of the work I do, and there are many others. So I know there's support, but you should take the question to God first and let God show you. Because perhaps that connection of going to God first rather than going to people in the world to say, "Can you help me understand this?" is actually how God is going to show you your identity. I was surrounded by a lot of prophetic people when God told me very clearly who I was. God didn't give all of them the answer. There's some who really knew and could understand and could see me. And there were many who knew some things about me, but they didn't know my identity. You've got to know your identity and tap into God to help you understand it, to give you, ask God for the wisdom to understand, given this, now how do you need me to work in this world? How do you need me to show up in this world? How you need me to deliver my assignment in this world? Because it's God who created it, not the world. So I asked God if there was a title for today's episode and what we want to, speak to about this moment. And God said to me really clearly, triumph and tribulation. And I was sitting with that and I was like, okay, I can see it based on the things I know about the year and what is to come. I can see that. And God said, but say to them, which are you? And immediately it shifted the way that I was thinking about this triumph and tribulation. Which are you? Are you in the camp of triumph? Do you know that you know that you know that there is victory that already has been declared for us and on your behalf? Are you in triumph even though what you see around you might look like it's chaos, might look like things are being dismantled, that there's destruction happening, which is a part of the journey? Are you able to still trust and believe in God even when you can't see every single move or the moves don't make sense? Or are you in tribulation because you're overwhelmed by all the things that are happening in the world? Or perhaps you feel like you are supposed to be a part of the faction that's creating the chaos. Believe it or not, there's some people who enjoy creating chaos and distraction and all of those things in the midst of what is really serious. And it will be too late when they realize that the things that they have been doing have contributed to the demise of what we know the world to look like in this moment. But it will come. It will come. There's a lot of destruction up ahead, a lot. And what we know is that the things that happen at God's hands are a true dismantling, and that we are receiving, by and large, what we've asked for by making the decision that we were not going to take action before. And that's a really hard truth to sit with. I would understand if you don't agree, and I would understand if you don't like it, but it is where we are. We had the opportunity to begin to really shift things in a significant way. And many of us showed up to do just that, and many of us did not. And so collectively, we are here. And the question in front of all of us is, so what now? Triumph or tribulation? Despite all the things that I have shared today about what's happening in this moment and what's happening in the year ahead, what you should know is that for many of you who have been walking in alignment, have been planting the seeds and doing what God has asked you to do, you are in your divine protection, that God is covering you. That doesn't mean that it will always be easy, but it does mean that God has seen you and it is acknowledging that what God has said to you is true. In the midst of the things that God has been showing me over the past few years, God has continued to show me what this journey looks like for some, and it just simply is different. And part of the work that you will need to do is get comfortable with the discomfort of standing in a season that is, I'm going to call it a winning season, right? Of standing in a place of growth in the midst of so many other things that are happening around you. And I want you to be encouraged. If you know that it is you I'm talking to, I want you to be encouraged, because by your growth, the trajectory, the shift, the change that you are creating as God is elevating you, divinely elevating you in this moment, the more that you grow, the more that you amass, the more that your platforms grow, the more that your voice is renowned, the more that you continue on that trajectory, the more impact you are going to be able to have. The more discipline you use with what God has given you, the more God will be able to give to you and the more impact you'll be able to make in the world. There are massive shifts that are going to happen, and God continues to look at and evaluate our hearts to see where we are, to see if we are in position, if we are in the places that are in alignment with receiving what God has set aside for us, not just for ourselves and our families and the generations to follow, but for humanity. And so if you are someone who knows that God has been tapping you on the shoulder and you are trusted, I want you to be encouraged, and I want to tell you to keep growing, to keep listening, hearken to the voice of God and do what God is telling you to do, because we will need you. Each and every one of us have a purpose for why we are here. We may or may not fully understand those things. We have a God-given identity. We are anointed to do something very specific in the world. And it is time for us to understand what those things are, even if we don't feel like it's the time for us to do it. But we need to understand what it is. We need to stand in it. We need to begin to open ourselves up to say, God, what next? It will take all of us in order to create the change that needs to happen in the world. And that was always God's design. So that is it for this episode of Our Divine Guidance. I want to thank you for joining me. Before I go, I want to encourage you, if you've not yet grabbed your copy of my book, Healing is Required, it is available on my website at healingisrequired.com and www.healingisrequired.com. It is also available on amazon.com. You can buy the ebook there as well as the paperback version. This book is all about healing. It is about what God says. It's a divinely given book. I always call it God's book because God just downloaded it through me. Even the personal examples that I've included in the book, they are ones that God was like, this has to be in there. And it is such a beautiful book designed to help us reconnect with why healing is important, how we are all connected, and then how to actually create a path to do your healing work. And it is so critical for us, as I said earlier in the episode, for us to be working on our healing journey. It is how we will be able to move through so many things that keep us disconnected from one another. It is how we will be able to heal the relationships in our families. And it's how we'll be able to strengthen the relationship in sub-communities all around the world. Our healing is so important. When we heal, we have a different way that we look at the world and we look at one another. And in order for some of us who are called to sit at tables and create conversations around how we get to peace, on how we rebuild, we will have a difficult time fulfilling that part of our assignment if our hearts are not clear, if we're not able to look at what is at the greatest good above our own desires, our feelings, the emotions, the frustration, the anger, the hatred, whatever the things might be that you may be experiencing. And some of you are like, did I just catch that? Did she say somebody might be at a table to create peace and they might have hatred in their heart? Yes. In the same way that people can become jaded even when they are serving God. That's the truth. We all have healing work to do. And that is why the timing of this book is so important. And, you know, one of my favorite stories to tell about the book, I'll say this and then I'm out, is the cover. So I wrestled with the cover of the book. I wrestled with it. I was like, is there's not something else? And God was like, I need you to tell them not to judge a book by the cover. And the background of this is that your neighbors, your best friends, your family members, they are walking around with different things that they're navigating all the time that you don't know. And we just make an assumption because they don't say anything that everything is good. And the truth of the matter is we've got to get ourselves to a place where we're not judging a book by the cover, where we make assumptions around why people operate in a certain way without knowing their story. We make assumptions that people who are around us are doing okay when they are falling apart. We make assumptions that we have an understanding about something because of the way we look at the world. But that's unfair because other people have different experiences and the way they look at the world is different. When God calls us to love that God desires for us to build upon, to strengthen, to be the way that we operate in the world is unconditional. And it takes work for us to come from places of needing healing to be able to get to the place where you can look at and experience the world with unconditional love. That is it for me. Thank you for joining today. For those of you on live, thank you for those listening to the replay. Again, this is the January Divine Guidance episode. My name is Anika Apple. I am God's prophet and God's heart on earth, and I look forward to seeing you next month in February to deliver the divine guidance. As always, I wish you peace and blessings.